Hey there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 65 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. We are coming to you on Tuesday, December 27th. We hope all of you out there had a very Merry Christmas and a happy Hanukkah and a joyous Kwanzaa to everyone out there. Today we celebrate the second principle of Kwanzaa, which is Kujichagulia, which means self-determination. And we are self-determined to preview our next three basketball games, some general ACC impressions thus far in the season, and impressions about our team through the non-conference portion of the schedule. First up, I'm Donald Wine. I'm the captain of the ship this week. Also, we have our usual partners in crime in Atlanta, Jason Evans. What's up, man?
Dude, I want to hear you say that what the second day of Kwanzaa is again. You're educating me. I had no idea that
where did this come from?
I had no idea there were themes.
This is new. This is new. We've done 2 years of holiday time, and we have not heard one detail about Kwanzaa until this year.
Actually, I believe last year I talked about Kwanzaa, but we didn't actually record during Kwanzaa. So
No,
Okay.
wait. I just want to hear you say the name of it again.
Kujichagulia.
That is beautiful.
That's great.
That's gonna be my new mantra, I think.
Self-determination.
We'll at least title the podcast with that.
Oh, we got to.
Yeah.
How do we spell that?
I got it. Don't worry, I got it.
How many A's are in that word?
How many what?
How many A's are in that word?
There's quite a few. There's only 2, actually. There's a lot of I's.
Yes, hi, Jason here, and I'm celebrating Hanukkah, and I have no idea what night of Hanukkah it is because my kids have gotten to be too old for us to do stuff 8 nights in a row because we're all too busy. I think I'm a bad Jew.
It was night 3 last night. And happy Hanukkah to all y'all.
And that was Sam, somewhere in Colorado. Are you still in Vail or are you back in Denver?
No, back in Denver, and I realized just now, right before we started recording, that when I was in the mountains the other day, I brought my microphone with me that I normally use to record. Turns out I didn't have it actually plugged into the computer. It was it's a USB microphone. It was plugged into not a USB port. So it wasn't actually capturing any audio, and I guess that whatever audio you got on the last episode was just my computer speaker or my computer microphone.
Fine. You sounded fine. Yeah.
So maybe I didn't need this thing all along.
You have a really good computer, apparently.
All right, good to know. Anyway, it's also Hanukkah for me, but for everybody celebrating any holidays, I hope that they're all lovely.
Exactly. And I had a very Merry Christmas yesterday, or 2 days ago. Was it 2 days ago? Yes, it is. Today's the 27th that we're recording. But yeah, so let's get into the games that we have coming up. First off, Saturday, ACC season kicks off. Duke travels to Blacksburg to take on Virginia Tech. And then after that, the week after the new year, we have 2 home games, first against Georgia Tech on January 4th, and then Boston College against on January 7th. So what we did out there is, because there's 3 of us and there's 3 upcoming games, we each took one. So we're going to start with Virginia Tech, and Sam is on the clock.
Okay. So as Donald mentioned, Virginia Tech is our first ACC game coming up this weekend, Saturday at Castle Coliseum in Blacksburg. We expect it to be a raucous crowd because it always is there, even though the students are on break. I noted that the game is sold out a week in advance, so you can expect all of the ire and anger and excitement from any road ACC game. Of course, because we talked about it so much last time, Grayson Allen obviously will be at the forefront of the conversation, even though he won't be playing in the game. I'm sure we'll see plenty of signs and cheers and things directed at him.
Hang on. We don't know that. We have no idea. Indefinite suspension means he could play. I think we all really doubt it. We really doubt it, and I think Duke would get a ton of criticism in the media if he did play, if he doesn't sit at least one game. But we don't know when he's going to play.
Yeah, I'm going forward with this preview, assuming that Grayson Allen will not be playing.
That is a safe assumption, sir. So
Virginia Tech is interesting. Buzz Williams has been there for a few years and has really built the team up into something good. They're ranked 35th in KenPom, and on both ends of the court, they play pretty well. They're 33rd in offense and 58 in defense. They don't have any really spectacular wins so far this year. They did beat Michigan on the road in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, which was very impressive. It was a close win. They have only one loss to Texas A&M. So they're 10-1, which is a really strong start. They do have one more cupcake game before they play us, but I don't think they're going to lose that because the last couple of cupcakes they've played, they have blown out by 20, 30, 40-point margins. So Virginia Tech is interesting because I think two of their best players, Zach Leday and Seth Allen, are both transfers, and they both come off the bench for them. So the starting lineup is more sort of your normal sized lineup for a college basketball team. When they are playing their five best players, who I think are Justin Robinson, Ahmed Hill, Zach Leday, Chris Clark, and Seth Allen, they're kind of undersized. The tallest player in that lineup is Leday, who's only 6'7", but that team can score a lot. Allen, folks will remember, he was at Virginia Tech last year, but prior to that, he played at Maryland, and I believe was at Maryland when Maryland was still in the ACC for their final season. Leday is also a transfer. He came from USF. And is leading the team in scoring at almost 17 points a game, despite coming off the bench, and 7 rebounds on top of that. So we'll be watching out for him. It'll be curious to see if they go small, because their best lineup doesn't feature especially big guys, to see who's guarding who in that rotation. They have a really strong 3-point specialist in Ahmed Hill, who is averaging over 45% from 3-point land and scores 14 points a game. So it's going to be a challenge to lock him up. They have lots of ways to score. They just don't really do it from the middle. They kind of spread the ball around, and they've had a really successful season, as I mentioned. It's gotten better every year under Buzz Williams, and I think that they're really going to be looking for a signature win here at the beginning of ACC season. Obviously, Duke will have whatever distraction comes with Allen not playing and the fans in an opposing arena getting all over the team about Grayson Allen. So hopefully everybody is focused and on point, because this team is really strong. They're not obviously at the top of the ACC, but they certainly feel like they can contend. And they didn't give us a tough game last year, but I think that they are showing signs of improvement this year. They've got 4 guys who are averaging double-digit points, and that doesn't include Chris Clark, who is a 6'6" guard who's averaging 9.8 points per game and 7.7 rebounds. He's had a couple double-doubles recently. So there's a lot of good to say about this Virginia Tech team, and especially the way that Buzz has capitalized on getting transfers. I mentioned Leday, who's probably their best player. Before he transferred over to Virginia Tech, he was a good player at USF in the American Athletic Conference, but certainly not a star, and has really blossomed, especially last year and then coming into this year, has really blossomed into a great player for them. So a good test to begin the season. Certainly not Boston College, who we'll get to soon, but also not Louisville or Virginia or North Carolina. Probably the middle of the road ACC team, but this year in the ACC, middle of the road means that you're 35th in KenPom and knocking on the door of the top 25. So I think it's a great game for Duke to be starting out with. There will be a real test, and it'll be curious to see how Duke handles not having Grayson Allen on the floor against a pretty good Virginia Tech team.
Hey Sam, can I ask a question? What do you think Virginia Tech's odds are of winning this game? I mean, give me a percentage here. This is clearly the toughest game of the next 3 that are coming up. Sure. And like you said, they're 35 in KenPom. And they're a pretty good team. I mean, how huge an upset would it be?
It wouldn't be a huge upset, especially because it's on the road. If this game was in Cameron, I think Duke would win, not easily, but it would be 70-80% likelihood that Duke wins. Given that the game is in Castle, this might only be 55-60. I wouldn't be surprised if Duke loses this game, but I think that because their best lineups don't feature their biggest players, they're going to have trouble with guys like Amile Jefferson. And if Harry Giles or if Marquise Bolden have gotten over whatever has plagued them recently, Giles we have only seen briefly, but whatever's wrong with Bolden, I could see Duke really mixing things up in the middle against Virginia Tech and having sort of a non-Duke performance against them, but still coming out on top easily. So don't forget, I was going to say we got a 10-day layoff, and Virginia Tech they've got a game tomorrow. You're right, it's against a cupcake, but it gets them sort of in
game shape. I mean, Duke hasn't played a meaningful game. They haven't played a game that they feel good about, a meaningful game since beginning of the month, Florida or UNLV. I mean, it's just like
the schedule this year has worked out really strangely. Because we had 2 games almost back to back. It was 2 and 3 days right after exams, and then another long break for Christmas. And I don't remember a year where Duke came back from Christmas and their first game back was conference play. Usually there's 1 or 2 tune-ups before that. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Duke loses, but at the same time, they've had a lot of time to digest what happened last week and hopefully fix some of the things that went wrong against teams that aren't nearly as good as Virginia Tech. So I'm looking for this team to be more focused than they were coming out of the long exam break because there are more glaring issues to solve. So they're going to be more on their toes, and it's conference play, and everybody turns it up for conference play.
Hey, and let me do one more question. All right, so if Virginia Tech is going to beat Duke, what's the formula? What do you think that's going to happen in the game? Is it going to be a lot of threes? Is it going to be a lot of fast breaks? Is it going to be Duke shooting poor? What do you think would be the formula for this?
I think that they have 2 shooters who can shoot well from outside, Hill especially, and then Seth Allen. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 7 for 9 performance from Amile Hill that gets them over the top. But spreading the ball around is really more their style because they have the rest of the guys don't really shoot that well from outside. So it's not necessarily going to look like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. I don't know that Matt Jones is going to be matched up on Hill because there are other better all-around players. Justin Robinson, who is a player for Virginia Tech, not for Duke, is a pretty good player. Who's a guard. I mentioned Chris Clark, who has had a couple double-doubles recently. He's a bigger guard that Jones might have to defend. So Hill might not get the toughest defensive assignment from Duke, and he could really go off, and that might be the way they do it. What I think is especially interesting about them, as I mentioned, is that 2 of their best players come off the bench. So there might be a situation where Duke has sub guys out, and all of a sudden Leday is in there facing a defender that isn't Duke's best and is able to move them around a lot. So they're sort of an inverted team, right? They play a normal lineup, but they get their best minutes in a couple cases from guys from the bench. So it would happen later in the game. It wouldn't happen early. And obviously the crowd is going to get into it. So if they start knocking down shots, they're going to get really confident. They're not going to win if everyone on their team is shooting from outside. I think Duke is going to try to force the guys not named Hill and Allen to try to shoot from outside because they don't do it that well. And normally Duke is really good at chasing players off the 3-point line. I think that you might try to see them, holding back a little bit for those other players, not letting them drive in to move the ball around, try to keep them outside, make them shoot if they're not those good shooters, because there's a real distinction between the good shooters on this team and the poor outside shooters.
That was a great preview of Virginia Tech.
Watch, they're gonna beat us by out rebounding us, and this will have all been done.
That was actually outstanding. Thank you for that, Sam. All right. Let's move on to Georgia Tech. And sorry, Georgia Tech, you're thinking that we're going to have some very rudimentary preview of you, but we have a spy. Jason Evans lives in Atlanta within a stone's throw of your campus. And, it's probably a very long throw, probably more than a stone. But we have a spy.
I've made the drive from Georgia Tech to Jason's house.
Yeah.
If he could throw a stone that far, that would be very impressive.
Yes, it's probably a Bryce Harper cannon. But we're going to give it to Jason, our resident spy in Atlanta, and he's going to preview Georgia Tech.
So unlike Virginia Tech, I don't think Georgia Tech has much of a chance against Duke. There are several experienced players in this team, lots of juniors and seniors who play a good bit, but that may not be a really good thing, as these guys have pretty much been in the bottom half of the ACC throughout their careers. This Georgia Tech team was 3-15 in the ACC 2 years ago. They were a decent 8-10 in the ACC last season, but they had one nice win against Virginia. But other than that, they didn't really play with the best teams in the conference very well. And they also lost their 2 best players from last year, Charles Mitchell and Marcus Georges-Hunt. Georges-Hunt had been at Georgia Tech for 9 seasons, I believe. So they lost those 2 guys, and those guys were the heart of what.
And Charles Mitchell was also at Maryland with Seth Allen, wasn't he, or something? Something. Yes, close to
that. Good call. Yes, he was. He was at Maryland. So so he was also in college.
Guys everywhere here.
Yeah, he was also in college for double-digit years or something like that. And those guys were the heart of what Georgia Tech had a year ago, and they don't have them anymore. This year, they're really led by their man-in-the-middle 6'10 junior Ben Lammers. He averages a double-double, 15 points, 10 rebounds a game. Reasonably physical, but also somewhat skilled. Doesn't really go outside at all. I mean, he's not a guy who's going to step out and take 3-pointers. And Duke has had a little bit of an issue in some games with big men who step outside. And picking those guys up. Lammers is not going to do that. He's going to play in the paint for the most part. And like I said, he's their best player. I think he's going to have trouble with the athleticism that he's going to see from Duke's big men, Amile Jefferson and again, we've talked about Giles and Bolden. At some point, those guys are going to be back. We have to think so. And I think it could be a real issue for Ben Lammers with really quick players like that. Their most versatile player is probably senior forward Quentin Stevens. He's 6'9", and he's very long, but he is a guy who goes outside, takes a lot of 3-pointers, more than 4 of them per game, but he only hits 30% of his threes. He can get hot. Like they played Tennessee earlier in the year. He was 3 of 5 from 3-point range. And then they have a junior guard named Tadrick Jackson who hits 55% of his threes so far this year. He only shoots when he's really wide open. He only takes a couple of them a game. And I think he's going to revert to the mean. Like in past seasons, he hasn't been nearly this good a 3-point shooter. And I think this is a guy who, has got hot a little bit early in the season, and it may be time once ACC play comes around for him to revert to the mean. But those are the 2 guys who are going to take threes. Tech does not take a ton of 3-pointers. So Josh Pastner is the new head coach at Georgia Tech. He had been at Memphis, and before that, he was the chief recruiter at Arizona. And he's brought in 5 freshmen to this team. Some of them are doing a little bit of stuff, but not a lot. He really needs a talent infusion on this club. His best freshman is a kid named Josh Okogie, who was barely a top 200 recruit. He wasn't even considered among the 10 best players in the state of Georgia last year, but he's a guy who's a real winner. Like his high school team was very, very successful, and he's having a really nice season for Georgia Tech. As a freshman, he's their second leading scorer at 14 points per game, gets on the boards a little bit for a guard, gets 4 rebounds a game. He's a decent shooter no matter where he goes to, and he's athletic. So he's a little bit of a talent upgrade, but man, Tech just doesn't have the talent, not even close to the talent of Duke, let alone a lot of other teams in the ACC. Josh Pastner, I think, really needed to get to Georgia Tech a year earlier, so he could have had a chance at the class of 2017. I'm going to go off topic for a second here, guys. The class of 2017, the class that's about to come in from the state of Georgia, is like unprecedented in the amount of talent in it. Get this, 13 of the top 100 players in the class of 2017 are from the state of Georgia. 13 out of 100.
Are any of them your remaining son in high school?
None of them are my son. No.
Okay.
My son doesn't start for his high school basketball team. He plays a role, but he doesn't play a role of a starter. So he is not among the top 100 basketball players in the state, but 13 are from the state of Georgia, which is amazing. 2 of them are headed to Duke, Wendell Carter and Alex O'Connell. 2 of them are headed to Auburn. 2 of them are headed to Louisville. Florida and Florida State each got 1. Zero of those 13 players are going to Georgia Tech. I mean, this could have been a year that transitioned the Georgia Tech program to the big time. If Pastner had signed even 2 or 3 of these top 100 players that are in his backyard, it would have been huge for Georgia Tech. And it didn't happen. They're not going to get any of them, it looks like right now. There are a couple who are still uncommitted, but Georgia Tech really isn't on the radar for them. And Pastner really needs a talent influx. He's a great recruiter. That was the book on him at Memphis. That was the book on him when he was the chief assistant at Arizona. But he hasn't started doing that yet at Georgia Tech. He's only been there a year, so give him some time. As for Tech this season, I know I got off topic there for a moment, but let me rein it back in a little bit. They've got 1 decent win on their resume so far. They beat Virginia Commonwealth, VCU, by 3 points, and it was at VCU. I mean, that's a a pretty decent win. I mean, VCU is not what they were under Shaka Smart, but they're still a top 40-ish kind of program, and a team that will probably threaten to make the NCAAs, and no one will want to play them once they get there. So that's a really nice win on their resume. But there's nothing else that Georgia Tech has done that's even close to impressive. They lost to Penn State in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. They got trounced by like 25 against Tennessee. They lost to their in-state rival UGA, a game, that's a huge rivalry game. They lost to UGA by almost 20 points just a few days ago. And then they played Wofford the other day, and they only won by 4. Now, I mean, Wofford isn't like a terrible team, but that's the kind of team that if you're an ACC club, you're thinking like, this should be an easy game. They only won by 4. And to add insult to injury, Georgia Tech starts the ACC with an absolute murderer's row. You ready for their first 3 games in conference play? They open with UNC, then they come to Duke to Cameron, then they play Louisville. That's that is a tough schedule stretch. So this team is, I feel sorry for them, and they don't have the talent to play with any one of those teams. I mean, if I was in Las Vegas right now, I would probably put money on Georgia Tech losing each one of those games by 15 to 20 or more points. Tech is ranked 144 in Ken Palm, 144 there. Thank goodness for BC, because if it wasn't for BC, Georgia Tech would be the worst team in the ACC. Their offense is terrible. They are a woeful number 245 in offense on Ken Palm. They only average 68 points per game. I mean, it's hard to imagine how a Duke team that has one of the best offenses in the country, that averages something like 80 points a game, it's hard to imagine how Georgia Tech's going to stay close to them. Tech rebounds the ball fairly well, but they turn the ball over a lot. Almost 20% of their possessions end in a turnover. Their D's okay. They play a mix. Sometimes they play man-to-man, but they also play a lot of 3-2 zone. And they block a lot of shots. They block about 7 shots per game. But when they're in that 3-2 zone, you can get rebounds off of them. I've seen teams playing them get open corner threes and the such. I just think this Georgia Tech team is going to have real trouble playing with Duke. Sam, I asked you, what's the formula for Virginia Tech to beat Duke? I'm not sure if you asked me the same question that I can come up with a formula for Georgia Tech to win. I mean, I guess
they're rated lower than our last 2 opponents on Ken Palm.
Yeah, and we didn't play well and beat both of those teams by 10 points. If I had to guess, I mean, Georgia Tech's going to have to ugly up the game a little bit, make it really physical. They're going to have to hope that Ben Lammers is able to put up his 15 and 10 or even more than that, despite playing against much more athletic big men, and maybe Lammers is able to frustrate some of the Duke big men. And they're going to have to shoot a lot better than they normally shoot. They're just not that good of an outside shooting team. Quentin Stevens is going to have to be, he's going to have to shoot a lot of threes, but he's going to have to make a lot more than he usually does. And they'll probably just have to hope that Duke doesn't shoot well, that Duke doesn't play well. If it was at Georgia Tech, you can always go, oh, maybe Duke will have trouble with the rims and the sight lines or something like that. But it's at Duke. My bet is Vegas will have like a 22-point line on this game, and I don't know that I'd take Georgia Tech even getting 20 points.
Well, there you have it. Georgia Tech, be prepared for the whirlwind, and we're sorry that we have a spy located in your city, but sorry, we had to do it. We have spies everywhere. And
in this game, would you just, I mean, these are blind guesses, but do you guys think that Grayson Allen plays against Georgia Tech?
I hope he does. I think he does.
I think he does, and I hope he does, because I would like him to have a home game as his first game back.
I agree.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not sure if he ends up playing, but it would certainly be like the best one for him to ease back into, rather than this one, or especially like once we get to Florida State and then Louisville after that, the games are going to start to get harder.
Yeah, right. and I don't think he will start, and but I think when Kay brings him in, he'll be the only sub that comes in, and the crowd will go crazy and really give him a lift. That's my prediction. That's what I think will happen, and I think that would be inappropriate. I don't know how anyone could look at that and say they only sat him for one game and then didn't start in the next game. I mean, we're talking about one measly tripping. It's sitting him for 2 games. Although a lot of it may just depend on how Grayson is doing in practice and what Coach K thinks about Grayson's attitude. I sort of feel like the suspension is for Grayson to get right in the head more than it is a punishment. Don't you guys agree?
I definitely agree with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if he had left it up to the ACC to dole out the punishment, then, like we said before, he wouldn't really be dictating the terms of it, and we won't know soon, if ever, what the benchmarks are for him to come back. But we don't really need to.
Yeah, and I think the benchmarks are an attitude thing; they aren't a performance thing. Because I bet he's not tripping guys in practice. So,
right.
I don't know. Marquise Bolden still has a foot injury that we don't know the entire details of. So, listen, I will not speculate on these things.
Conspiracy theory.
So I was going to say we've gone from the team that had the best chance to win, Virginia Tech, to the team that has very little chance to win in Georgia Tech. Now we get to the team that I think has no chance to win. Donald, tell us about BC.
Yeah, so let's get into BC. So BC right now is 7-6 in non-conference play. I believe they have one more game in non-conference play before they start ACC season, which I guess would be on the 28th or 29th. They're ranked 193rd in KenPom, and let me give you a little taste of like how bad that is. KenPom, if you look at all of the 15 ACC schools, there are 13 teams in the top 57 in his ranking. The other two are Georgia Tech, as Jason mentioned, which is at 144, and BC's at 193. So there is a 140 rank position gap in the polls between number 13 in the conference and BC. So that is how highly or not highly KenPom rates
Hey,
Boston
Donald.
College. Yeah.
Donald, the best thing you can say about BC's KenPom ranking is they're looking up at Texas A&M Corpus Christi.
That's a good start. They should. they have nowhere to, they have almost nowhere to go but up. There's one place they have absolutely almost nowhere to go but up, and that is their strength of schedule. They are ranked 330th in strength of schedule, which means that they are playing teams with the likes of Maryland Eastern Shore, Stony Brook, Towson, Dartmouth, Sacred Heart, Nichols, who they lost to, Hartford, who they lost to, Fairfield, who they lost to, and they've lost to a couple other teams. The best team they probably played was either Kansas State or Auburn. You can take your pick there, or Harvard, and they lost to two of those teams. So this BC team, ironically, last year entering conference season, they also had a 7-6 record, and we all know how that turned out. They went to go 0-4 in the conference.
I'm sorry, can I jump in really quick? Did you say they've lost to Nichols and Hartford?
So Nichols was their first game
and
of the season,
Fairfield.
and they lost. And they lost to Fairfield as well.
Okay, because Nichols State and Hartford are both ranked below 300 in KenPom.
And
Jason, are you sensing a theme here?
Oh my God!
They're
I
bad.
didn't realize how bad BC was.
Yes. So I don't know if you guys seen The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but there's an episode about Will and Carlton being on the same basketball team. And they had an offense, and the offense was called Get the Ball to Will, because Will was their offense. Well, BC's offense, their Will Smith, is Jerome Robinson, their sophomore. He averages 20.5 points a game, 5.2 rebounds a game, 3.2 assists a game, and 2.1 steals per game. He is the bulk of their offense. He attempts over 28% of their shots, and he makes 28% of their field goals on a team basis.
Yeah,
so
can he rap?
I don't know if he can rap, and frankly, I'm assuming they're all being set up for a career after basketball. That might be his. I have no idea what his interests are, but he's very good at basketball. But apparently, the rest of his team is not. I don't know if this team is going to go 0-4 in conference play. I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt, but
yes, they're going to go 0-4.
They might. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say they win one game, but Jerome Robinson is their offense. He's the bulk of their offense. Kai Bowman, a freshman, averages 10.4 points a game, and he's the only other player that averages in double figures. They have a couple guys who can rebound. Mo Jeffers, Connor Tava, and Jerome Robinson are their main guys on the glass. But they're 265th in adjusted offensive efficiency. Their strength of schedule has been terrible, and they're losing to a lot of these terrible teams. This team is not good, and it's going to be if we're talking about Grayson Allen, if he doesn't play against Georgia Tech, he's definitely playing against Boston College, because this is a game that you can easily ease them back into the offense. Hopefully, this is a team. Their team has a little bit of size, but not too much size. And this would be a great game to see how Marquise Bolden and Harry Giles can flow a little bit better in the offense and get their legs under them. Their best player, Jerome Robinson, is 6'5". Kai Bowman's only 6'1". So if you're throwing Grayson Allen, Luke Kennard, Frank Jackson at these guys, we're going to have the length, we're going to have the size advantage, and we should be able to do well in the interior and also on the perimeter defense. They're not going to shoot a lot of threes. They make 38.7% of them, but again, most of that is Jerome Robinson taking most of the shots. So if we shut him down, we keep him under 20 points. The rest of the team is not going to score that much more. So very simple about Boston College. They're not good. If we play our game, our length and our skill should win the day, and we should probably win this game by about 20 points.
By the way,
they're not going to win an ACC game this year. They get Georgia Tech on the road, and everyone else in the conference is going to beat them handily.
Well,
so you stole it. I was just going to say that. So I was just going to say that exact thing. I was going to say their only chance for an ACC win, because they don't get Georgia Tech at home, is on Tuesday, January 31st. Wake Forest comes to BC. And actually, you know what? Their best chance for a win.
Yeah, that game last year, they were down. They were up 5 points with 20 seconds left and lost in regulation.
Their best chance for a win may be on New Year's Day against Syracuse.
Yeah, might be the one.
Did I just lead us into talking about the rest of the ACC?
Yeah, well, this is good. So
go for it.
Let's get into general ACC impressions. The ACC has been playing pretty well over the course of the season, the non-conference portion of the season. So we're going to talk a little bit about who has impressed us, who has not. Hint, hint, Syracuse, you're on the clock. And the biggest surprises in the ACC. So I'm going to start with Jason, since he did the lead-in. Give us a little bit of what you've been seeing so far in the ACC.
Well, I'll tell you that. So in terms of biggest surprises, I'm going to go with Notre Dame, who's 10-2. They've really played nicely this year. They've got some pretty good wins. They beat Northwestern. They beat Iowa. They played back-to-back really close games against Villanova and Purdue, and they lost both of those games. But they were close games. They were competitive games.
Those are good teams to beat.
Those are really good teams.
And that Villanova game was an incredible game all the way down to the end. I think they were down.
They had
4 points with like 6 points or not 6 minutes left, with a minute left until they started doing free throw shooting. But it was very close to the end.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame has been pretty much as impressive as anyone in the conference. And the reason, my other surprise about them, the reason they've been so good is Bonzie Colson, who is the shortest center, the shortest big man in the ACC. Bonzie Colson is listed at 6'5". I think he's actually 6'4", but his arms make it seem like he's 7'3". The dude has he looks like he's an alien from another planet. He has the longest arms.
And he kills us every time he plays.
Oh, he destroys Duke. He just massacres Duke.
Can we figure out some sort of conspiracy? I don't want to injure the guy. I don't want him to be hurt. But can we engineer some sort of conspiracy where he has to magically sit out a game against us? Because that would be great.
Dude, I don't know. But the amazing thing is he started this against us in the ACC tournament last year when they beat us. He started stepping outside and taking threes. He's been taking a lot of threes this year as well. And he hits them at a decent percentage. He's hitting almost a third of his three-pointers. Bonzie Colson's averaging almost 17 points a game, 10 rebounds a game. I think he's, not that he is ACC Player of the Year, but he's in the running for it. And I'll tell you, you want an amazing stat about Notre Dame this year in terms of being a surprisingly good team. Notre Dame is hitting more than 85% of their free throws on the season. That's absurd.
That's awesome.
85% of your free throws on the season is just Bonzi Colson's above 90%. Matt Farrell on their team is 27 for 27 from the free throw line.
Speaking of guys who have been in college for 87 years, Matt Farrell has been in college for 87 years.
Yeah. Steve Vasturia is hitting 94% of his free throws on the year.
Steve Vasturia is still there?
Yeah, this is his 12th season.
These guys are 30.
I love the old ACC.
So I think Notre Dame to me has been a very surprising team. Has played really well. They have nice depth. They play a lot of different guys. No one plays too much. They rebound well as a team. They pass the ball really well. They average 19 assists a game, which is a really big number. And they just get good shots, and they hit those shots. They're hitting more than 40% of their three-pointers. If they continue this, and look, let's be honest, I can't imagine they're going to continue to hit 85% of their free throws on the season. I mean, 75% of your free throws would be great. Duke is hitting 75% of our free throws. It's like the highest free throw percentage that Duke has had in a decade or more. They're at 85%. If Notre Dame comes down a little bit off of that, it could affect them, but I won't be at all surprised if Notre Dame I think Notre Dame has a chance to be among the top 4 in the ACC this season, which would be really impressive. And then the other surprise to me, we knew they were going to be good. I didn't realize how good Louisville would be. They beat Kentucky the other day in one of the best games I've seen all year. They've also beaten Purdue. We talked about Purdue a moment ago regarding Notre Dame. The only loss on Louisville's schedule is Baylor. They lost to Baylor by 3, and at the time, people didn't know how good Baylor was. Well, Baylor's currently in the top 3. They're undefeated. And that game was a third game in 3 days. They were playing in a holiday tournament. They played Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The Baylor game was the Friday game, and I think Louisville may have been a little bit gassed. This Louisville team is really, really good, and we're going to know a lot about them very, very soon. So they just got done with the Kentucky game. They had a 4-game gauntlet that they're on. Kentucky was the first game in the gauntlet. They beat Kentucky. They then play Virginia at home, Indiana at home, and then they go to Notre Dame. And that's over the course of like the next week or so. A little more than a week for those games. So it's Virginia, Indiana, Notre Dame coming up for them. We will know a lot about the Louisville Cardinals after those 3 games. And I don't expect it, but I won't be shocked if they win all 3 of those games. That's how good I think Louisville is. To me, the top 3 teams in the ACC are Duke, Louisville, and maybe Notre Dame. So those are my surprises in the ACC so far this year. And my disappointment is Syracuse, who sucks. And everyone is shocked that they suck. But hey, Sam, give me your surprises and disappointments so far.
I just wanted to point out another team that has been very competitive the last few years in the ACC, and that's the Virginia Cavaliers. They don't have a signature win yet this year, but here are the opposing teams' point totals from each of their games. You ready? I'm just going to read them down.
This is fun. Yeah.
51, 32, 38, 34, 41, 52, 61, 66. That's the one game they lost against West Virginia, who is really good in a Big 12 that I think is competitive with the ACC as far as the top half of the conference goes. 53, 39, and 52. So, Virginia obviously has had, they don't have a ton of turnover. Austin Nichols, who we discussed some time ago, was dismissed from the team, but Tony Bennett just manages to get these guys to play just outrageous defense, and no one can score on them. And it continues this year, right? They're like I said, they don't have a signature win yet. The best team they've played is West Virginia, who they lost to, but they are ranked 3rd in KenPom. They're incredibly efficient, and when you look at like the stats for these guys on the team, and you look at the actual players, their best player is probably the point guard London Parantes, who I think has also been there forever. But a team that could end up being a top 3, top 4 ACC team, Parantes might get a 3rd team ACC All ACC nod just because they're going to have to pick someone if Virginia is that good. But Virginia doesn't feature any really star players. There's nothing about them that stands out except for the fact that when they get in their defensive stance, you can't score. So I'm constantly impressed and amazed by Virginia and at the turnaround that Bennett has had there. because it happened basically overnight for him when he showed up in Charlottesville, and it's continuing rolling this year. I'm very curious to see how they do against upper level ACC competition once they get around to playing those games, like against the Louisvilles and Dukes and North Carolinas. And then speaking of North Carolina, we like to rag on how the scandal has hurt them in recruiting and all these things, but you know what? They keep on trucking. They've had a pretty good season so far as well, and they feature some guys who are going to be good NBA players potentially. So North Carolina's been really good. Virginia's been really good. I guess from a distance it doesn't seem like a crazy thing, but the consistency of Virginia and North Carolina's ability, honestly, to weather all the distraction of the scandal and remain one of the best teams in college basketball. Those are both really impressive performances to date for me. I think that you already mentioned Syracuse, and they're the standout when it comes to disappointments in the ACC. And I don't think that it's even worth mentioning anybody else, because that's the one team where, going into the season, you thought that they were going to be competitive. They were probably going to make the tournament. And as it stands now, I don't know that they will, because they're sort of on the edge.
There's no way. There's no way. Some of their losses are horrible. They lost to Syracuse they lost to St. John's by like 30 points.
Yeah, which was their worst. There was some crazy stat about it was their worst loss in some amount of time, or some crazy thing like that.
And St. John's is not good.
No, they're not. Syracuse obviously has opportunities to make up bad losses because they play in the ACC, but who are they going to beat? We'll see.
Hey, I got a Virginia thing for you. I'm glad you brought them up. And by the way, one notable thing about Virginia, Kyle Guy, their freshman, their best freshman, has the best hair in the ACC. The dude wears his hair in a bun on his head. He's awesome. The women must be swooning at that guy.
Do we have to give Jason a lecture about the man bun?
I think we might have to.
All right, that's coming for you soon, Jason.
Oh, okay. But so the cool thing about Virginia, I think, there's a very real chance. London Prentice is right on the cusp of not averaging 10 points per game. There's a very real chance that this team won't have anyone average 10 points per game. I mean, think about how crazy that is.
They could reasonably be a number one seed. Like, you can envision them being a number one seed with
absolutely
double-digit scorers.
And it's partially because, they legitimately play 10 guys. Like, the other cool thing is no one plays more than 30 minutes. Prentice plays 29 minutes a game. No one on this team plays 30 minutes a game. They've only got like three guys, I think, that play more than 3 or 4 guys that play more than 20 minutes a game. They have 10 players. Everybody plays like an equal amount of minutes. They sort of say, okay, who's hot this game? Who's playing well? They are nothing but interchangeable parts. It's pretty cool. And man, huge props, huge credit to Tony Bennett. Has that
also,
guy
with
not...
their defensive scheme, that's how that works. Like, they're always shuffling guys in because they want to make sure that their defense is always fresh. And that really plays into the point totals that Sam pointed out. Has Tony Bennett won a Coach of the Year yet nationally?
I believe he did, but I'm not. I'll look it up. You guys keep talking.
I mean, dude, he's incredible. I truly think you could just roll out 10, just very average players, give him a couple months to coach them up, and they'd be a top 20 team. He's about as good as anyone in the country right now, because he's not doing this with big time recruits. None of these guys are top 100 recruits. None of them are. And he just it's amazing. It's amazing.
He's been an ACC Coach of the Year twice, and he won the Henry Ibo Award in 2015. But he hasn't won Naismith or AP Coach of the Year at Virginia. He did it. I believe it's his previous role at Green Bay.
Well, that's a crime because
Washington State rather.
So if you took recruiting out, and recruiting is a huge important part of coaching, as Coach K and Calipari and many other guys will tell you. But if you took recruiting out of the mix, he's the best coach in the country, I think. Tony Bennett is.
Almost certainly. I mean, look at what he does with talent that is nowhere close to the teams that he's playing against in Louisville and Duke and North Carolina and all these other elite schools.
Okay. Donald, your turn. Surprises? Disappointments?
So, I think the one thing when we started out before the season, when people were talking about the conference as a whole, they were wondering if the conference was top heavy. And the answer so far has been yes, but that top has been 13 teams. 13 teams, as I mentioned before, are in the top 57 in KenPom. The top 11 teams in the ACC so far this year have at most 2 losses. That's astounding. If you look at from top to bottom, this conference is stacked, and each game in this conference, I mean, obviously some of that's going to balance out with the conference schedule, but to have all these teams doing so well in non-conference is an incredible thing. And it's not because of strength of schedule. I know we mentioned Boston College and how weak their schedule has been, but for the most part, our teams are playing very, very quality opponents, and they're beating them. And even if they aren't beating them, they're giving them a good show, as referenced with Notre Dame versus Villanova. I think these teams, that's the surprise to me, is how many teams have performed above expectations. Usually we have a couple that meet expectations, a couple that are below, and a couple that kind of exceed. But when you have 11 teams in a 15-team conference that don't have more than 2 losses, that is a remarkable accomplishment for a non-conference schedule. Especially granted that we have a lot of these guys are in conference tournaments. A lot of these guys play high-profile non-conference opponents every single year. And we have the ACC Big Ten Challenge, which is another conference that is always compared to us as far as best conferences in the country. So that is remarkable. I think that's the surprise for me, how well that the conference as a whole is playing. I echo everybody in saying that Syracuse is probably the disappointment. You would think that Syracuse would have been one of those teams that maybe had 1 or 2 losses in non-conference, especially given the last couple of years they've played what some would call a weaker non-conference schedule, but still were always entering ACC season right in the thick of things, and this year they're not. The one thing I want to say about biggest surprise is I'm going to send out some love to my friends down in Miami. I think that this was supposed to be a down year for them, and so far they're 9-2. They have a couple of losses that are very close, and I think that what they're doing down there, especially we're talking about Virginia, with a lot of guys that aren't rated highly in recruiting when they're coming out. Miami's kind of doing that same MO, and they're paying attention to what the Tony Bennett's of the world are doing, and they're doing this the right way. So I like to see how they progress. That game on January 21st when they come to Cameron, and then we go down to Miami in February. I believe it's on the 25th or 28th. Those are going to be some good games, and I think that with the quality of this schedule that we have coming up, we've talked about how our schedule has been kind of a disappointment, our non-conference schedule, but we've played some pretty good teams that we'll see later on down the line, maybe in the NCAA tournament. And this conference schedule, with the exception of this first week, is going to be pretty loaded. And I think that is the big surprise is our team that we I think we still have the best team in the country. I think we still have the best team in the conference. And I think that when we enter some of these games, we're going to be getting their best shot. And their best shot is going to be a lot tougher than people probably put on paper before the season. So I'm really, really impressed with the ACC as a whole. I'm really, with the exception of Syracuse and probably Boston College. But I think that is going to be something to look out for as conference schedule starts. Which one of these teams continues to be hot and which of these teams start to fall off. Let's get into the last topic that we have, which is our impressions of our team through the non-conference schedule. As Sam said earlier, we usually have a couple games after Christmas before the ACC season starts, but since we had this 10-day break that will end on Saturday, we should get into who our MVPs are so far this year, what the most surprising things that we've seen out of this team, and what we expect to see as we enter ACC season. So Sam, I'll start with you.
All right. I think that we all know there are basically 2 guys you can pick for MVP, and I'm going with Amile Jefferson. Obviously, we expected a lot from him coming into this season. He missed last year, most of last year when he was playing really well. So far this year, I think, is he still averaging a double-double, or he's close to a double-double? Has been a real leader at both ends of the court. and just overall incredible play from Amile Jefferson. And you hear, nationally, I think more people talk about Luke Kennard nationally because he scores more points. But I think that the most valuable guy on this team has been Jefferson, just in all the different things that he does in the rebounding and the defense and moving the ball around. He has become a much better passer and a dribbler in the time that he's been at Duke. And I think we're going to look back and really, really appreciate that he was able to come back for this season and be one of the leaders on this team.
I think the MVP so far, even though it is easy, like you said, to pick Luke Kennard, I agree it's been Amile Jefferson. Like you said, he does average that double-double, 14 points, 14.2 points, 10.8 rebounds per game. But sort of overlooked, guy's averaging almost 2 blocks per game, 1.9 blocks per game. And the quality of his offense, his ability to, first of all, he finishes great around the basket, but his ability to get the ball in the post and use his length and use his stride to pick off different angles. The guy uses the backboard as well as anyone on the team. You can count on him to put the ball up off the backboard and for it to go in. He's hitting almost 65% of his shots from the field, which is tremendously, tremendously impressive. That is a big number when you consider we're talking about a guy who's averaging more than 14 points a game, which means he's shooting a fair bit. I think Jefferson has been fabulous this year, and we talk about it sometimes, but we don't talk enough. He's the voice of the defense. He's the guy in the back who's telling everyone what to do. He's the one who makes all the switches, on the screens and that other stuff happening down low. And when opposing teams have trouble getting good shots inside, which they mostly do against Duke, it is because Amile Jefferson knows when to double, knows when not to double, knows when to switch, knows when not to switch. He can, if his guy goes out and sets a screen and Amile needs to pick up the opposing team's point guard, he's capable of doing that. Really, really impressive season so far. He absolutely shows that he's a fifth-year senior and that he's a coach on the floor. I thought he's had a great year, and I feel terrible. Donald, I really hope you pick Luke Kennard.
I'm really glad you guys picked Amile Jefferson because I am going to go with Luke Kennard.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, so obviously there was 2 guys that you could list, and I'm glad you guys picked one so I could pick the other and not feel too terrible about it. Luke Kennard has been excellent with his scoring. His scoring has kept us in games. His scoring has won us games, and his scoring has put games out of reach. And with all respect to Amile and everything that you guys talked about with him being a leader on the floor, before the season, I was one of the people who talked about the fact that leadership was one of the main reasons Amile was back, and he has done that and then some, with his defense as well. But Luke Kennard's scoring has been very welcome. As we figure out who, what this team is and who the pieces are and how they fit together. One thing that we weren't counting on was Luke Kennard to be leading the team in scoring. I think we all said Grayson Allen was going to be the one leading the team in scoring. So for Luke to come on and really be confident with his 3-point shot, with his mid-range jumper, which is at 62%, which is an ungodly number for a mid-range percentage. Just him figuring out how to score, and also he's starting to establish a little bit of leadership on the floor. He's playing well on defense. He's not one of those guys that is a liability like there were at some points last year. And I think that's all based on his confidence. The confidence that he has, that he knows that he can go out on any given night and put up 20, and for the most part has been doing that. So I'm going to go with Luke Kennard. I like that you guys went with Amile Jefferson because I think he's probably co-MVP in my mind. So I'm glad that we listed both the guys that I think deserve the mid-season MVP accolade so far.
Luke Kennard leads this team in minutes played, almost 36 minutes a game. And while I think that's going to go down now that Duke is getting more and more guys back, huge credit to him as a sophomore, as a guy who people thought would be coming off the bench this year. People weren't sure if he was even going to start. Huge credit to him for leading the team in minutes played. And you mentioned he's hitting 62% of his mid-range jumpers. Do you know what he's hitting on 2-pointers, which includes all the short shots he takes? He's at 69% of his 2-point shots. That's a stupid number.
Yeah, I want to say he has kind of the Steph Curry syndrome, where his mid-range percentage is higher than his layup percentage, and I think both lead the conference. So I think that is those are stats that are really, really fun to see in the NBA, but it's also very, very fun to see in college. And I'm glad that he has found his stroke and found his confidence of just finding lanes and getting the ball in the net however possible.
This Duke team has 5 guys averaging more than 12 points per game, and I really feel like any one of those 5, Kennard, Allen, Tatum, Jefferson, and Jackson, if I told you that guy led the team in scoring in a game, you wouldn't be even remotely, moderately surprised. And I have a feeling we're going to soon add Harry Giles to the mix as someone else who's like that. But really, really impressive variety of skill, so to speak, on the team.
I'm going to throw something out very, very quickly. We didn't talk about this out there before the podcast. Very quick. Give me the best game we've played so far this year. And I'll start with you, Jason.
Who are you asking? I got to go first?
Yeah.
Can I look at the schedule really quickly? I think it might be I think it might be the UNLV game. We crushed them. Now UNLV's not that good, but it felt like we were really clicking on all cylinders in that game. I thought that was a very, very. I mean, even though UNLV is not great, we more than doubled them. I thought that was probably our most complete effort. Sam?
Yeah, I want to pick a game against a better opponent. I know that, and so I'll take, just because I didn't get to really think about this, I'll take the Rhode Island game when Luke Kennard was so fantastic. Just an overall really good effort from against a very talented team that I think had a lot of fans in the audience. Duke hasn't obviously had a lot of road experience per se this season. The UNLV game being one of them, but UNLV is not good at all. So I'm going to take the Rhode Island game. We saw a lot of the a lot of the capability of this team in that game, and I think that Duke's best game is ahead of it. Is ahead of where we are now. It'll be somewhere in the ACC season where everyone will get healthy and the team will really start clicking all together, and you'll see us beat a really good opponent, a top 25 quality opponent by 20 points or so. So I'm excited to see when that game appears.
Yeah, I agree. I when I was thinking about the question, in my mind, I was thinking about that Rhode Island game, and it wasn't because of the fact that we didn't really blow them out. We beat them by 10 points, but that was a top 20 opponent, a team that people expect to be in the NCAA tournament and perform well throughout the season. But I think what we did well is that we fought hard. It wasn't a something where we ran away from them or we. At every single point of the game, there was some twist or turn. We responded to it, and I think that is what this team is going to need in ACC season. I think that's why that game was kind of the standout game in my mind, is because no matter what Rhode Island threw at us, we were able to respond back and eventually pull away. And we never, despite the game being only 10 points, it was always comfortable. We weren't sitting there it wasn't one of those games that during the NCAA tournament that CBS back in the day would switch to another game. We weren't beating them by 40, but there was not a point where I felt, this game is not going well. It was always they would take a shot and then they would get back up and fire a shot back. So I think that was our best game so far this year. But I agree with you, Sam. I think we have plenty of season left, and I think as our team becomes more healthy and closer to 100%, we are going to see our best game, hopefully against some of these other opponents that we have coming up.
Hey guys, what about Florida? I mean, now that I look back on it a little bit, that Florida game was pretty darn impressive. Remember how good Jason Tatum was against Florida?
Yeah,
he controlled the second half against Florida.
That was the other game I was thinking of. So it's also a good call.
And Kennard and Jefferson were awesome in that game too, just absolutely. And that was the game where Grayson Allen was couldn't hit a shot, but was facilitating really well. Mm-hmm. He had 8 assists in that game. That was Florida was a really impressive, and that's a good Florida team that we pretty comfortably we won by 10, but it's one of those games where, like you say, it never felt even remotely in doubt.
I was going to say all good calls. and that Duke hasn't really had. I mean, they had one opportunity against an elite opponent, which is Kansas, that they, it's not like they blew it. They played really well right up until the end, and lost on a last second shot by one of the best players in the country. That game might be one of the most impressive, just because Duke hung with a really great team and was severely shorthanded.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line, you guys said it very, very well. Sam, you said it first. We definitely haven't seen Duke's best game because we haven't seen the real Duke team. What we've seen has been a shadow of what this team eventually will be when guys are integrated back into the lineup, when they figure out how to play together, when all the nagging injuries are past us. We won't really know what this Duke team is going to be until maybe mid-January or even early February. And I still think it's very, very likely that what they're going to be is a ridiculous juggernaut that stomps on the throat of everyone they play. At least that's what I hope.
That sounds good to me. And I think that will do it this week. Do we have anything else?
Wrap it up, baby.
All right.
I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, that's good. And so that will do it for this week's episode of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Everyone have a happy, healthy new year. We hope 2017 brings everything a lot better than 2016 did for some of us. But we will check you out in the new year. For now, for Sam, for Jason, I am Donald. Thank you guys so much. And Duke Band, take us out.